it's much easier to move a square or a circle. Oh no. Much easier to move a square or a circle than it is to move a whole honkin' hand. Much easier if you look. I can just fill it in. Wonderful computers. You see that there? It's much easier for your eye to follow that than a whole bunch of fingers, a thumb, and so on. And then, you know, same thing for this guy. Circle there. Boink. Much, much easier for your eye to follow. So, with that in mind, let's track where I am here. Now time for the in-between. Turn on the onion skin. Now, here's what's a little more difficult to do digitally than on paper. On paper, it's pretty easy to flip. You put your, without your light table on, put your paper down. Your paper is usually somewhat translucent, so you can sort of see the drawings here. I like to have my onion skin set very light. This is actually a little bit darker than I usually have it. I happen to recently, the new computer, so my settings aren't exactly where they usually are. But if I activate the things you could do, I'm going to do it by hand. But one way to do it real quick, again, since if you're working digitally, you copy the main shape. You could always copy the whole head, but what happens is, so you copy the head, you put it in the middle, and that's one way. So you're not going to change shape because it's exactly the same thing. But as we said earlier, or I said earlier, this guy's head was a little bit different than that. But we'll go on the just generalizing here. So you don't always want to do a straight shape in between because it looks very mechanical. So let's say you want some drag or something on this in between. And instead of doing a straight in between, which is like an exact breakdown right in the middle, if you read the Richard Williams book, Animator's Survival Kit, and Eric Goldberg's book, Character Animation Crash Course, and Illusion of Life, and a whole bunch of animation books, spacing really adds a lot to the feel of personality and character and timing. You always need, when something's traveling on an arc, you always need the point of the arc, the furthest point. But at the same time, your brain sort of fills that in. So to cushion the timing or ease out, a lot of times it's kind of good to just go a little off center, just a little. What this will do here is it will speed up the animation from the first drawing to the second drawing, or first drawing to the in-between, and then slow down a little bit from the second to the third. But I don't want to get too much into that because right now we're just talking about keeping your shapes consistent. But you might want a little bit of drag, like the top of his head is leading the head. So here, instead of onion skinning, actually I'm gonna turn that off. Right now I kind of actually, let's put it back on. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I'm gonna generalize where I want this here. I want his head to lean forward a little bit into that second pose. So you kind of feel he kind of leans his head forward and then brings his chin back. Moves it forward, brings the chin back. It's very rough what I have here. I'm going to now lighten it up with the lightest little blue there that I have. Oh, I didn't need to do that. Turn the light table on. So here. Now, flipping forces your eye to watch the shapes. You are not filling in spaces. You're looking at the movement. You can see how the head leans forward a little bit and then comes in. It's like forehead, chin, forehead, chin. So, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to reinforce this sphere here with the darker blue. Now I'm going to find the center line. I know I want is right here. And now, if you look at how I flip this here, this is one of the main things. You can see how the key line for the eyes raises a little bit. It's wrong. The eyes aren't going to move in the head unless you actually start to tilt the head. And obviously he's tilting his head down, so if anything, the line's going to lower, not raise. So I'm just going to adjust. But with my eye, I'm going to flip back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So his head's going to dip a little bit. And now, one of the things to remember a lot of the time, there's two ways of looking at your drawing. You can kind of like squint, and sometimes to kind of like blur out a lot of the details and just look at the simple shapes. You can sort of pull your brain back a little bit and look at the whole shape moving. But also, too, when you're starting to actually get in there to the nitty-gritty, I'm going to draw the front of this face now. So what I'm going to do is, I'm only going to look at the front of the face, this part right here. As it moves, that's all I'm going to really look at. I'm not really going to worry myself with much more than that at the moment. So my eye and my brain are following that. And I can see if it's going to grow, if it shrinks. Like for instance, like Sabina said, her drawings seem to shrink. I think that's what she said, or at least change size. I have a feeling it's shrink because when you're tracing something back, your pencil naturally goes inside the line, not outside. So if I was to make the chin shorter, if I was just not to really pay attention and I started making this chin shorter, I'm going to see it. Right there, you see, boing, it's shrinking. Your eye naturally sees it. So I'm going to come down this way. When I was just flipping, looking at that, all I was looking at was that front thing, the front of the face. Now I'm looking at the jawline. All I'm looking at moving is the jawline in comparison to, you know what, let's darken up these lines so my brain can follow that, because your brain looks at anchor points and landmarks. So right now your brain, even if you're looking at the jawline, your peripheral vision, even though it's only a centimeter away, is also looking at that cross right there, the crisscross. So, and now I could see that crisscross, now that my jaw is getting wider. If you look right here, the way that the jawline goes up back, it doesn't hit where the center, the key line for the eyes hits. It's a little bit in front of. Now that can change, because if his face was to turn towards us a little bit, then yeah, the jaw would fill out that side of the face. But regardless, which I think it's actually should do a little bit here, I'm just following the shape and the size. And also looking at that jawline there. And that's the gist of it, right there. Now, let me turn this off. Boom, 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 boom. His head's dipping down and coming forward, but it's not changing mass. as I look at it, maybe it's getting a little smaller here. If you want to play with the digital world, you can select it and pull it down a little bit. That's what's great about working digitally. You don't have to sit there and erase. You can just move stuff around if you're working in vector shapes. It's vector lines instead of bitmap. Bitmap is when it uses pixels, such as Photoshop, other Sketchbook, other bitmap-oriented software. The new Storyboard Pro 4 has bitmap in addition to working vector. With a bitmap line, what you put down is what you put down. You can erase it. You can move it around with the transform tool, but it's pretty much there. With a vector line like this, you can sit there and grab it and move it around and do whatever you need to do to kind of get it into place. There we go. Back on subject. So, there you go. Set clear shorthand shapes. I call these shorthand shapes. Now, someone else mentioned to me also what a good idea was. You can find your own shorthand shapes. You don't have to use these. You can even get a little bit more complicated if you like. If you're actually starting to draw, then when you start in betweening the details of the face, then there's another set of sub-shapes, as I call them. And you might want to go in and find those sub-shapes. Let's just do like a triangle for the face. And since he's smiling in both of these drawings, I'm going to just go for your simple shape like that. And on here, let's turn this face back on. I had two of these here. I'm not sure which was the right one. I think that was it. Let me see. Yeah, the one with the colored pupils. Okay. So let's do the same thing here. You see here what I did was I wasn't even thinking about it too much. I followed the contour of the face. This side of this triangle bows in, this one bows out. So you pretty much do the same thing here. I'm not being things extremely perfect here. I'm kind of going through relatively quickly, so I don't sit here forever, bore you guys with minutia and details, but that's pretty much it. Let's turn that face off again. Boink. So now we got this going here. And now we can go in on here and add that shape. So you see, your eye will look at the distance above the key line to this corner here. Oh, that's too right there. To this corner here. That's what I'm going to be focusing on at the moment. So when I go here, doing red. Actually, scratch that. Well, that's one thing I can do. Okay, so that's actually a little bit harder. I'm jumping ahead. What you should probably be concentrating on at the moment is where these lines cross the center line and the distance between them, between the bottom of the face and that circle there. So I'm going to look right here where it hits the center line, the forehead, and where it hits in between the bottom of the circle. See, and if you look here, there's more space there than there is on this drawing. Because usually when you smile, your jaw gets pulled up. I kind of just drew that naturally. I wasn't thinking about it too much. But even if it's wrong, it's right. If those are the keys, you got to compensate for that. So it's a little malleable, a little changeable there. You got room for play. So I'm going to look at the distance between here and here. That's what I'm going to keep my eye on. Let's draw an extra little line there. And we're closer to this drawing than we are to this drawing, as you saw in the onion skin. that we're closer to drawing number 2. So I'm going to use drawing number 2 right now to get that line, to reference it. I'm a little off base. I'm just going to start again. And remember, not every line you throw down has got to be the line. You're finding it. You're finding your way. So don't feel like that, like I said, every time you put your pencil down, or stylus, whatever you want to call it these days, it's got to be exactly correct. Alright, what I'm going to start doing now is I'm going to, what I kind of call, back up my brain and look at the overall shape of this little triangle thing here. And I'm going to just go back and forth. Now, unfortunately, you can't really toggle your drawings as well digitally as you could, as fast as you could flip them with paper between your fingers. And because when you flip your paper, you go lightning fast, and you just see the movement, almost as if it's faster than it would actually happen once it's on film. So this is a little, your brain is a little, unfortunately, has to go a little slower than the traditional age-old way of doing things. I'm using the tools of digital animating to, because you see here, this bottom of the triangle is a little more narrow than this one. So it's getting a little bigger as we go on. Just play around with those shapes, and it's a little messy of a line. So not that it matters when you're roughing stuff out like this, but for you guys, I want to tidy it up a bit. So I'm gonna lighten it up, or just go over it again now that I have that line there as a guide. Like so. Sorry, I realized I wasn't talking for a moment there. Either you're sick of my voice, or you're like, hey, there's something going on with my sound. Alright, let's get rid of these little lines there. I was just using as a guide. Another thing I used to do, I worked on The Simpsons for a long time, and Lisa's Simpson's hair was really difficult to draw. Here, I'll show you an example. There's a little trick doing purple. So let's say this guy has Lisa's hair, right? Once you got what Lisa's hair was down, once you got that shape down, sometimes it would take a little while. You'd work at it for a few minutes until you got what you thought was, okay, yeah, that's Lisa's hair shape. But it was very hard to move around. One thing to do was, make a circle to find it. Like that. So let's say, here we are now, and, well, I'm actually going to get rid of that circle, but I can still show you. Okay, so let's say, to keep track of where her hair was, and I'm using this as an example, but it works with anything that you're animating, in-betweening, and moving shapes around that are difficult to move. Sometimes you get a character that's difficult, that's not designed well. Lisa Simpson was a real interesting character, and we all, know exactly what she looks like with her hair, just like Mickey Mouse's ears, but it was not a good design for animation because it was hard to draw. So she has, let's see, 3 spikes there, 3 spikes there, and then 2 spikes there. So we got 3, 3, and 2. But so one thing that I used to do that helped me a lot to keep track of where things are, just while you're drawing, let's say, if you look here, this spike here goes right on the key line of her face. Right now it's Lisa Simpson as a man. So that's what I'm going to pay attention to on here. And you see right here, it's lower. Now that might be okay, but actually now that I'm flipping and I'm just using my eye, it looks like her hair is moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue that line where I want her hair to be. And I'm going to put a little circle by it. And by putting a little circle by it, oops, that's the wrong one. I put a little circle by the third spike from the bottom. So I see it move, and my eye is just going to see where that is. And if I look, if my eye is going to be looking at this center line and that circle. Let's make it blue just so we can match it. That's blue, and that's blue. So my eye is going to be looking at those two things, and this little corner here, and it sees that it's not matching up. And it was a process. You kind of scribble it down there till you get it right. There. That's actually feeling right to me now. Now I'm going to get rid of that. Use the one I just drew. Oops. Oh, no, that's wrong. Use the one I just drew. Go back into here, and I would have, in the past, erased it. But now I'm just going to delete what's not right. So if you're having a difficult time tracking pieces of your drawing, do something like this. Just put a little satellite, a little moon by, a little mark by that piece of it, the person's nose, this, whatever it may be, colored in. And that way your eye will be able to track it easier. Now this looks like it rotates much better. I mean, I still see some things that are off, but in general, that's a good rule. Oops. Turn this off. There we go. There we go. So you see, everything feels real solid. The relationship between the little moon that I made moving around compared to the skull, compared to the key line changing in perspective, and her hair feels pretty solid. Bye, Lisa. We'll miss you. Okay.